Why don't we get started? So, just to get everybody where we are at, obviously we have right now two bills in committee. We have Senate Bill 98 and we have Senate Bill 85. 85 has been sent to us as a second committee. Normally, we're not really a second committee, but over the years it has occurred. And in this case, in Senate Bill 85, there's a little section in there that is a health insurance mandate, and so therefore it did cause it to come to this committee. So now we'll take up the next issue is Senate Bill 98, and your phone is ringing way over here. Okay. All right.
Sounds like it's coming from back there. I think it's because I'm in the Matrix.
Okay, so what I would like to do is first just open have the motion, and then we'll have discussion. So Representative Patusek, seconded by Representative Ammon, moves that we reconsider our action on Senate Bill 98.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Inasmuch as I was the co-sponsor of the original SB 98 with Senator Murphy, and I voted OTP to move it forward, I figured I might as well be the one to move to reconsider, and so we can work on it.
Move the microphone closer.
Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Because normally I speak loud enough, I don't need the microphone. Inasmuch as I was the co-sponsor with Senator Murphy on the original SB 98, I figured I might as well move it forward for reconsideration, and because the blurb was already written. So I hereby move to reconsider Senate Bill 98.
Okay, so we're now open to discussion. So I want to first give a little prelude, and then I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say. All right. Notwithstanding that some people were not supportive of any marijuana legislation, no matter what, what occurs here is that yes, we did have out of the blue a second thought about the marijuana legislation, and even from the Senate, they did introduce a study committee. I don't know if all of you are aware of this, but they have introduced a study committee that would review the issues of creating a cannabis statute, which would be operated by the state. I would say myself personally, I was obviously aware of this issue because we did it last year. Senator Abbas now Senator Abbas, Representative Abbas had presented the legislation, and we had a fairly lively discussion on the House floor. It did pass, but then it failed in the Senate. I guess what I would say to you is that the issue is whether this is something we want to get done or whether we just wait. Because I would also say that we have in our possession now, as a retained bill, we have Representative Eaton's bill. And Representative Eaton's bill is the same bill. It is operating by the state. So theoretically, if we don't do this reconsideration now, we would certainly, come September, we will then dive down deep into that piece of legislation, let alone the Senate Study Committee doing whatever they're going to do. So we would have something on, theoretically, we could potentially have that issue on the House floor come next January. Having said that, what the key element of this bill and Eaton's bill versus what we had passed before is the idea of how many locations we're going to have in the state of New Hampshire. Having said that, it is that I'm using that as the focus because it is not in New Hampshire's way to limit licenses. Other states have done that, and we usually we call it the taxi medallion. That a city would only have so many taxi medallions in its community, and it would restrict it. What that does is it creates winners and losers, because all of a sudden now that taxi medallion in and of itself has value. And we see in other states a liquor license is worth $250,000 just in itself. So New Hampshire has never gone down that path. And we've always taken the path that if we're going to do something, if we're going to legalize it, we're going to have stores, whatever, we're not going to limit how many restaurants you can have. I mean, it's amazing to me that some states will literally limit how many restaurants they have in a state. That we're not going to limit that. We're not going to, we'll issue, if we're going to issue a license, it's come one, come all, as long as you have fine, upstanding citizens and don't have a legal background that might bar you from having a license. So if we could turn ourselves back to when the prohibition ended and the state of New Hampshire made a decision to say, okay, we're going to have that free-for-all with licenses when it comes to beverages, and they set it at 6%, but that when it came to distilled, including wine, that means over 6%, the state made the decision that they were going to limit access to those products and having to buy through the state. In my mind, after being on this committee so long, what I think is most interesting about that decision, what it is that when you go down that path, you actually don't have to set a tax rate, because the state is operating and selling the product. It has its margins, and then delivers the margins to the state. So you don't get into the battles of tax rates, which, as anybody probably knows, that once you create a tax rate, it can be fought over, it can be challenged, legislature can be annually questioning that tax rate. I would say in my time on this committee, the 30 cents a gallon on beer I've seen that bill at least half a dozen times. So this model, one of the appeals of this model is that we don't have to set a tax rate today. If at some point in time in the future we decide that we do want to offer licenses, that the state of New Hampshire might decide to get out of the business and say that it doesn't want to do this anymore, then obviously at that point in time it'd sell off the stores and then set a tax rate. But if you do it this way, then you could say we're kicking the can down the road. But at this point, what we're saying is that there was other goal, a greater goal, and that was that what we have seen occurring in other states is I would call the marijuana mile, in which you would have multiple stores all in the same street, up and down the street, and I think that is the senators is the most offensive of the marijuana legislation. Theoretically, they're not all going to stay open, because the free market would be at some point in time would theoretically could fix that, and if they don't sell enough product, then they're going to go out of business. But that it is in terms of that possibility or not, or where we are with that if we go with this model, with that we just go a limited amount of stores. We have the Liquor Commission Enforcement Division, it has that. Obviously, this is the most way we can ensure that young people are not getting access to marijuana through through the state system. So, having said that, I guess I'll now be interested in questions that people might have on whether we should reconsider. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Way back when, at the outset of your remarks, I believe you mentioned a House bill sponsored by Representative Eaton
Correct.
that you said was essentially the same as this bill.
Correct.
So are we then really talking about a matter of timing? Because the House bill, which is retained,
Yes.
if it were to be approved by this committee,
Right. It would hit the floor
then
in
it would hit
January.
the floor in January, whereas this bill, if we vote to reconsider and then
Yes.
we vote to recommend to the full House, and if the House were to approve, concur with the Senate, assuming there are no changes, the effect would be more immediate in terms of implementation. Well, with respect to passage.
For passage, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Because to get this actually in place, it's going to take a couple of years anyways.
Okay, thank you. And a follow-up question, if I may, for you. So would you just speak once again to the matter of a study committee with respect to this particular legislation and how the two relate?
So the study committee's report would be at the end of, good. So it too theoretically could have legislation ready for January. Because what the study committee is the report of the study committee is supposed to be in the end of November, and in which then it would be in time for legislation to be introduced in January.
So for the benefit of everyone, including me, what we're really doing is being asked to vote on the creation of a subcommittee at the request of the Senate to study and make recommendations for implementation
And move the clock up.
and move the clock. Yes, thank you.
Yes. Representative Burrows.
Yeah, has it been established who would be on this committee? Would it be bipartisan?
So the Senate committee?
Yeah.
It has a fair amount of people on it. It's a commission, so it's got a lot of people, but I think there's 4 reps, if I remember correctly.
Is it bipartisan?
Well,
I'm not hearing an answer.
so the answer is all committees are always bipartisan. So yes, the 4 would be, there would be 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. Yes, Representative McAleer.
Yes, Chairman Hunt, I wonder if you saw this letter from Marijuana Policy Project that came in after 7 o'clock last night from Karen O'Keefe. She makes some very interesting points here that could throw sort of a monkey wrench into this. And basically what she says is that a state could have private employees do something that might be against federal law, but they couldn't have public employees doing that. So it throws up a roadblock if, in fact, the Liquor Commission decided to sell it. Now, it's just a possibility that somebody could file a lawsuit against that. And she recommends a couple of safety valves to overcome that in case that's the case. So,
I have to admit, I have not seen it. So what were the safety valves?
I'm sorry?
What were the safety valves?
The safety valve was to offer an out to the state that they wouldn't have to sell it themselves. Can I get Carrie to make copies of this and hand it out?
Sure. I thought you said we all got an email to us? Okay, yeah, I have not seen it. But, okay, next is Representative Spear.
If I understand correctly, we are going to maybe vote on this bill, the modification to 98. And that would take precedence over what the Senate is doing, or it could move things along faster.
The Senate
they're
put it
just
on
gonna do what they're
another
gonna do.
bill, so we would theoretically, I have to admit, I'm not sure whether the other bill was a commerce bill. Does anybody know whether?
What was the number?
What committee was it in? Yeah. Health. So theoretically, we would have to have the health committee. We would talk to the chair and ask him, to whether to whether we support the idea of that study committee.
I have a
And then we usually, normally, if it does go to committee of conference, we get one seat at the table for that. And that, yes, that would be done through committee of conference.
Then I have this question. This bill, or 639, the original bill, which this is a very small modification of,
Right.
was studied extensively by both parties. A
Right.
huge amount of effort was put into creating that bill.
Correct.
It was bipartisan in nature. Both teams agreed to it.
Right.
And it was told by a number of people that came here in the hearing, said it was pretty good. So my question is, how much more studying are we going to do on this? You can study this until we all die of old age,
Which is getting close.
which is getting very close. I mean, what are they going to find that's different that we don't already know?
I would, yeah. Well, obviously, there are certain senators who are reluctant to pass it, and they were able to convince other senators to go with the study committee. We do not presume other people's motives. Yes. Right. Okay. Representative Herbert.
One of the options before us that we don't reconsider?
So yes, if we don't reconsider this, 98, if we just say no, then 98 will just go on with the motion that we already have passed, passing 98. And at that point, the only thing we would have left is we have Representative Eaton's bill that we would be able to work on this year and then introduce on the floor come January.
Well, would you believe? I don't want to.
Yeah, make sure your microphone is on and,
Would you
and you
believe-
speak closely so so everybody at home can hear you.
Would you believe in my opinion, that we're at a place that we can pass this legislation as is, and that I think the State Liquor Commission is the right place to do so as we did with liquor. And from my point of view, would you believe, I don't want to do anything more than what we've already done. I just want to pass the legislation.
This amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
No, this is to reconsider.
No. We're reconsidering, Senate Bill 98 was, all it was that we were changing the dollar amount of when someone has not paid the bill to their beer distributor from $100 to $250. So once we reconsider that, then it'll be open for a new amendment. And that's what we hope to take up at 10:30 if we have a prevailing motion now on the reconsideration motion.
No, I'm even more confused.
We passed this. We need to open this up so we can add this amendment to it.
And the amendment
That's-
is,
This is
The
the
am-
amendment.
This is an amendment, this is a non-germane amendment. This is a non-germane amendment, and it can't be introduced because right now, we have no more liquor bills left in the committee. Okay, so this bill we still have, because we did pass it, it just didn't get sent over fortuitously. And so we have it available. So if you vote now for yes to reconsider, vote now yes, then we can take up 98. We're not going to vote on the 98 today, okay, because we want to go through normal commerce process, which is a subcommittee, and make sure that we've got all our I's dotted and T's crossed. And then next week, we can then vote Senate Bill 98 that will have the underlying language that was already in the bill. It'll have this new amendment, and we would be sending that to the House floor with this new amendment that has the Liquor Commission operating the stores.
so the Liquor Commission was not in this original,
Again, this amendment is mirrored off of we passed 639, but 639 was different. So this is a new amendment. This is totally a new amendment. to the extent that the concept of having the liquor commission run the stores rather than free enterprise, having private businesses run it.
Okay, I must have misunderstood the previous conversations because I all along have wanted and agreed to, and I thought it was already here, that the Liquor Commission was going to, as they do with liquor, would be the
Operator.
outlets.
That was Representative Eaton's bill. And
So
yes,
that's no
now
longer
that
the
is back.
case.
It has risen from the dead. It's right here in front of us, but you have to first vote yes on the reconsideration of Senate Bill 98 so that we can take that up.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Walsh.
You knew that I was going to
Well, I
comment
didn't
on
think
that.
you would let this go without.
I just wanted to mention how much I vehemently disagree with some of my colleagues here that there will never be a good time to legalize more drugs into New Hampshire and expose our children and expose towns to them that might not want it if it's in a liquor store in their town.
No,
for
they would
instance.
be able to veto it.
Okay, well,
They
that's
would, in this bill is that the
Okay.
towns would absolutely be able to.
unlike what
I
was
got a
amended.
lot of positive from the municipal association that the language that we chose in here, they're very, very happy with in terms of community control over whether one of these things would open up in their town. But go on.
Well, some of us, as you know, will never be happy with legalizing marijuana, cannabis, whatever you want to call it, in New Hampshire whatsoever. So, I hope to represent all of those people and always be a hard no. Just be on the record for that.
And we appreciate that. I really do. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion to reconsider Senate Bill 98? Yes. Representative Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that I support reconsidering Senate Bill 98 because I think that this amendment is important. As I understand it, under current law, even though marijuana has been decriminalized, people are still being arrested and getting criminal records for it. And state resources are being, in my opinion, wasted pursuing those cases. And I want to see that stopped.
Fair enough. Any more discussion on the motion? Okay. The clerk will call the roll on reconsideration of Senate Bill 98.
Representative Ammon,
Yes.
Representative Osborne.
Yes.
Representative Patusek,
Yes.
Terry,
No.
Host. Nope. Cole,
No.
Pacelli,
No.
Axton,
Yes.
Walsh,
No.
Burrows,
Yes.
Herbert,
Yes.
Bollier. Nope. McClear, not clear.
Yes.
Vincent,
Yes.
Calabro,
No.
Leo's not here. Gibbs,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Jared, Sullivan,
No.
and Chairman Hunt.
Yes.
6, 7, 8,
11,
10, 11.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 11, 7.
Okay. Great. The motion passes, and we will end our executive session. Need my gavel. Okay.
Could I recommend that people take a look at this
Yeah,
right now?
absolutely.
We got 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's time to read.
Oh. I wouldn't mind keeping.
Okay. Get my cards here. All right. Right, okay. Okay, so we'll start opening up the public hearing on the non-germane amendment. I would ask if anybody has written testimony, we'd love if you could submit it to the clerk so she can relax and not be too stressed over it. Okay. Well, I have one representative card, Representative Almy, and she doesn't. Another one. Representative, come on up. Yeah. So basically, the purpose of this public hearing is to find out how people feel about this amendment and pros and cons and about this amendment. So good morning.
Morning. Representative Susan Almy on City of Lebanon from Ways and Means, but I've only talked a little bit with a couple of the people on Ways and Means since I learned this was happening, which
Yeah, get right into that, Mike.
I learned this was happening just 2.5 days ago, I think it is, and got the bill on. I understand you're going to have a work session, which is good because I think you're going to need a lot of amendments after this. There are particularly, well, on page 6, you've got one small errata. Line 28. 265A1 is a list of definitions. Not
6. I didn't see definition.
page 6.
Okay.
There's a person may not be convicted of both a violation of this section and a violation of RSA 265A1. That is a list of definitions. It is not anything that is a violation.
Okay.
So
Okay, good pickup.
that's one. The other one's more related to what we do in Ways and Means. The line 11 on page 21, when you're establishing the cannabis fund, it is not 17,500,000 on
Yeah, we do have a new
And-
amendment to change those dollar amounts.
changes that to 15 million and not to the 500 because the 500 is in paragraph Roman 4. So, and Representative Ains read this quickly last night, and we do have appropriations in 2 places, and they look somewhat different. He added them all together and said, "Why are they giving 31 million to this?" And I am not sure, I haven't had time yet to talk with the drafting people, but I'm not sure, we had this problem in our committee too, and we left the double in, but the double was easier to connect at that point. Maybe it's sufficient to just change this to 15 million, or in the flow of what you're doing, you probably need it here, but we also made sure we had it in the back so that people would see the appropriations. So that's just something I
Okay.
guess I'm,
So it is true that giving the model, the business model, that now the state has a bigger cost to the state to operate these stores that it didn't have before. So there will be some changes in the appropriation amounts.
Mm-hmm. More than this. Yeah. Okay. So that's another problem that I've really got. I read through this. I read through it very carefully, except for the criminal parts. And I came to the conclusion that that the Liquor Commission was going to license retailers.
That was the old bill. Yes, that was 639.
Yeah, I know
That's
that was the old bill.
correct.
And that there was no tax, so there was no revenue.
Yeah. Oh.
Representative Ames last night came to the conclusion that you decided that you were running the retail stores, but I guess contracting some employees that were going to run them.
That's a possibility that could occur, but that is not, I mean, at this
So-
point in time, it will be, that hasn't been determined. That the commission has to work through that. But yes, we are, the concept, the business model is that we will not have a tax per se because the state will be operating the stores.
Right. And what that requires is that the Liquor Commission figure out what to pay the farmers and what to charge the retailers. I mean, what the retailers should charge for the marijuana.
So they are the retailer.
They are the retailer.
They are the
yes, with employees in those stores.
Correct. So in terms of how much they're paying the cultivators, that would be negotiated price between the cultivators and the commission.
The cultivators do not have much say except to not cultivate in that position, I think.
That's true. They could decide that they don't think it's worth they
Worth
don't
coming in.
But I would venture to say that if I were a cultivator, I would not be negotiating with the commission until I would not be beginning construction. I would not be doing anything unless I knew I had a contract with the commission. Once I produced the product, or how much money I was getting for it. I bet you even the banks would require that.
Yeah. And the problem with this is if you're allowing people to grow on real farms and they are producing a different level type of marijuana, they have a great deal more risk than the people who are growing it in the big manufacturing plants, let's call them. The big manufacturing plants are the best way to guarantee that you've got high quality marijuana, cannabis. whatever you
But
wanna
little
call it.
I know, I would venture to say that no one will be growing marijuana out in the fresh air because New Hampshire doesn't have a very long growing season. I can almost assure you that the only marijuana that you're ever going to see cultivated in this state is going to be within a closed building in a controlled environment.
There was one farmer that came to our hearing
Okay.
and insisted that he had been growing hemp for some time under the federal law and that he really wanted to grow marijuana and he could do it because he already knew how to do it under the
Okay.
federal law. I would be much happier if this bill said it can't be grown outdoors except in a particular kind of greenhouse, because otherwise there are a number of people I think that want to try this, even though the Farm Bureau doesn't have any interest.
That feels a little micromanaging at this
Yeah.
point to decide how they're going to grow it and where they're going to grow it. And
Well, the question is who is the Liquor Commission going to negotiate with about these prices?
the cultivators.
All of them, including this guy who wants to grow it outside and the people who think they could grow it in greenhouses.
It's what they do with liquor now.
No, they don't.
Don't negotiate.
They buy wine in bottles. and they have access to a lot of national information about how wine is sold everywhere and which wines are not doing well this year. I know that because a wine I really liked disappeared.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
So, so then there's also a question about, we now, and this was in the previous bill, we're setting up a new fund on page 25. Oh no, that's the old fund. We have the Alcohol Abuse Prevention and Treatment Fund already. And on page 22, we are setting up the new fund. Shoot, did I get this in the wrong place? A Substance Abuse Prevention and Recovery Fund on line 18. They both sound like they're doing pretty similar things. This one does not have a 612 reference yet, needs one. Speaking as a dedicated fund person. But I guess that because of the federal considerations, we have to keep it separate from the other fund. But there ought to be some kind of interaction, and I guess that you're going to leave a lot of this to the Liquor Commission to try to figure out.
Absolutely.
So
Great. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing, maybe you're not done? Great.
No, I'm done. I
Okay.
think that you have multiple. I suggest someone do a search of the word tax in
Yeah, I
there
did notice.
and
I
fix
did
everything
page one. Yeah, we will be removing all the word tax.
and
from
make it a little bit clearer that we're going to end up with a liquor store.
Correct.
Liquor store model.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, I'll call on Michael Holt, who is from the Department of Health and Human Services, who oversees the therapeutic ATCs. Great. The clerk appreciates it.
There's good morning. Thank you. My name is Michael Holt. I'm the administrator of the Therapeutic Cannabis Program within the Department of Health and Human Services. I've got a couple of handouts going around. One is a list of suggested edits, and the other is a copy of Amendment 2023-1892H, which was the one that was posted on the website, and it only contains those pages that have suggested edits. So thanks for the opportunity to comment on this amendment. I'm not going to cover the public health related issues that have already been discussed and rejected, like a cannabis advisory board, which public health thinks is an important feature for a legalization effort. Annulments, which is another important social equity provision in cannabis legalization. And I'm not going to cover issues that have already been decided policy-wise, like the preference for a free market model over a state control model. I did want to provide to you a short list of items for consideration for an additional amendment. And the list includes typos, language changes for consistency, and a few substantive issues for discussion. First off, I'd like to say that from the perspective of the state's therapeutic cannabis program, the state control model proposed works only because it allows dual use licenses for ATCs to participate in retail sales of cannabis. It's the only way that this model works. Absent this allowance, the viability of the ATCs to continue to participate in the state's therapeutic cannabis program would be severely threatened, and the viability of the therapeutic cannabis program in general would be in jeopardy. So I want to thank you for maintaining the allowance for ATCs to enter the retail sales market as proposed by this amendment. That being said, the bill could be clarified in a number of places throughout the bill to make it more explicit. There appears to be some conflicting provisions that say all retail sales will be conducted only at state stores, but throughout the bill, there are the references to allow dual use certificates for retail sales is maintained. So again, some clarity should be exercised in the bill, but again, maintaining the ability of the ATCs to enter this market is critical for the therapeutic cannabis program to be maintained. From a public health perspective, there are 3 items on this list that I want to emphasize. The first being the most important. The first edit appears on page 9 of the handout. You can see them all highlighted. It should be easy to follow along. But on page 19, the bill establishes a serving size limit of 20 milligrams of THC per serving. This is a unreasonably high and unsafe serving size amount. It should be, the statute should say 5 milligrams per serving at most. There's a provision in this bill that allows the Liquor Commission to change that amount through rulemaking, but the floor absolutely should be 5 milligrams per serving. This is the most critical piece, public health wise, of this legislation that needs to be changed. The second issue I'd like to highlight is on page 13, which proposes a transfer or a plan to transfer the therapeutic cannabis program from the Department of Health and Human Services to the Liquor Commission. There's no appetite for either agency to have this transfer. This bill would require a plan for that within about 2 years. In my opinion, this is a holdover from previous versions of the bill, which established a new cannabis commission where that might be more appropriate. But under the current model with the Liquor Commission, it does not make policy sense from our perspective, and probably from Liquor's perspective as well, to consider a transfer of the medical program over to the commercial retail program. So I'd urge that be removed as well. The third point I wanted to raise is on page 16 of the handout. It's 15 and 16. There's a requirement in the bill for cannabis products to be dispensed in child-resistant packaging, but there is no requirement for cannabis to be dispensed in child-resistant packaging. And because these terms are defined strictly in Section 1, I believe this is an oversight. All cannabis flower and all cannabis products should be dispensed in child-resistant packaging. So those are the highlights. I don't want to take up tons of your time, but I would urge you to go through this list. There's other issues, typos, redundancies, lack of clarity. I guess one of the other, I can't stop myself. One of the other things is there's a provision throughout that allows, there are references to a municipality limiting the number of licenses in their community. However, the new section on municipalities and the requirement for them to take a vote does not seem to allow them to identify the number of licenses in their towns. It's only an up or a down. Yes, we have them, or no, we don't. There's also no provision for towns and cities to choose which types of facilities in their municipalities. I'd also point out that there appears to be a redundant appropriation for the money coming to us, HHS, and money going to the Liquor Commission. One place it says 8 million, the other place it says 17 million in two different sections of the law. So again, all those are detailed in the handout, and I'm happy to answer questions about this stuff now or later. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Terry has a question.
Thank you. Given that this is the House Commerce Committee and not Panera's, where I could pick two, I'm going to do a 1A and a 1B, Mr. Chairman, so I don't have to ask for a follow-up. And so here we go. Were you involved with this bill as it was drafted and ultimately passed in the Senate committee and the Senate as a whole? And if so, can you explain how they could possibly have inserted 20 milligrams rather than 5 in view of the fact that you have identified that as unsafe? Would they have had to be unaware of this because you didn't give that input, or anybody else? Or can you address that? Were you involved? And if so, how do you explain 20 in this version of the legislation when it is unsafe, as you say, and should be 5?
I've been involved in the development of this legislation since the first public hearing on the bill. The Senate did not introduce 20 milligrams. 20 milligrams came out of the House, got sent to the Senate.
Oh.
So his question is, why didn't you question it then? When it was in the House, when 639 was in the House?
Because an earlier version of the bill said 5 milligrams, and in some setting, it was changed during executive session and subcommittee work to 20.
Excuse me?
That's what he says. I don't know. Representative Burrows.
Yeah, I also had a question on the dose. You said that 5 milligrams is a single serving. My mom was 4'11" and weighed all of 95 pounds. I'm just wondering if that would have knocked her on her keister.
I would have suggested that she start with half that,
Cutting it.
half of 5.
Would it be important to indicate that somewhere on packaging?
There are requirements in the bill for packaging and packaging information, warning labels
Yeah.
about the time to effect. How long it takes a product to achieve effect. I believe there's sufficient education requirements in the bill so that dosing is an education topic that can be given to the public. However, starting the floor at 20 milligrams will absolutely have a profound impact and an increase in accidental, what we call poisonings, unintentional poisonings of an overdose of cannabis.
Thank you.
Oh, Representative Phillip.
Thank you for taking the question. Continuing the theme here of the serving size, given that 5 milligrams tends to be the standard serving size, would there be any reason to include administrative allowance to change the serving size amount, or should it just be set as a standard 5 milligrams and eliminate the administrative allowance to change the serving size?
The administrative allowance for increasing over 5 was language that was added when there was a cannabis advisory board in the bill. And the language proposed said, with the approval or the in consultation with the Cannabis Advisory Board. So the idea here was that if the Liquor Commission wanted to increase it to, say, 10, that might be reasonable. Other markets have a 10 milligram size. And so we wanted to give the Liquor Commission a little bit of flexibility, but have a consultation requirement with public health experts. So to answer your question, one of the things need to change, 5 with no allowance to change or 5 with an allowance to change. If the Liquor Commission were to change it from 5 to 20 through rulemaking, there would be significant involvement from advocates about such an increase.
You talked about packaging. So with the ATCs now, do they the package the marijuana in a form that children can't open?
Yes, all cannabis and cannabis products packaged by the ATCs come in child-resistant containers,
So they already have that.
including child-resistant, reclosable child-resistant containers for multi-use items.
So given that the ATCs are nonprofit,
This bill would allow them for a for-profit conversion.
The the discussion is about the ATCs, and that you made it clear that they have to be included in the bill. I didn't read it that way, frankly. I read it that the dual license was so that they could be cannabis producers, but that I did see specifically a line in the retail line that says only the Liquor Commission can sell it. So what I'm asking you is, you're saying that it has to be in here. They'll go out of business. Are you saying that there's not enough medical buyers as compared to what will happen in the commission, and that the commission stores, and that the commission stores will be lower price than what the ATCs are?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
That this has been our testimony since, day one when this bill was introduced, along with all the other cannabis legalization bills. That our perspective is, the state needs to maintain the viability of the therapeutic cannabis program, and every state that has legalized cannabis thus far has been able to maintain that program. But one of the key pieces there for the successful operation of a medical program after legalization is that legalization models have taxes and high taxes. So there is a cost benefit for patients to go to the medical dispensaries and purchase untaxed products. Each of these versions of the bill makes the cannabis cheaper and cheaper. And the only way under this model, where the only retail sales are either the state or the ATCs, the ATCs need to be able to enter this market. Otherwise, they won't be able to compete. Patients will go to where the prices are low, even though they're not getting medical education, even though they're not getting the products that they need, like ratio products, CBD THC ratio products like suppositories that no recreational dispensary is going to sell.
Why wouldn't the state sell it?
Why would the state sell it?
Well, because they want to sell it because they're the one person, one entity that's been licensed.
I've never
allowed to
been
sell
in a
it.
recreational store that has a suppository as a product.
So that could be what big difference about doing it through the commission is that we would actually be able to be doing things that that retail stores don't do.
That is one very minor example illustrating the larger point of, in order for this model to be viable, the ATCs need to be included in retail sales, as the amendment proposes. The definition of dual use certificate on page 4 specifically says that allows the ATCs to co-locate with and operate a retail cannabis store. The rulemaking provisions on dual use certificates include, it's a whole page on requirements for retail sales. Clearly, the intention of this amendment is to include ATCs in that sales.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Representative Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it possible also that without the dual license opportunity, that some of the ATCs might lose business because the therapeutic cannabis buyers might just find it simpler to go to the retail store without going through the process of getting approved for therapeutic cannabis?
Absolutely, yes. That happens. That is expected to happen with any legalization model. Patients can go as adults to recreational dispensaries and avoid talking to their doctor, avoid paying an application fee for the cannabis card from us, and to avoid being on essentially what is considered a state list of patients. So yes, absolutely, that will happen regardless. So it is important to incentivize people to maintain their registration on the therapeutic program and not self-medicate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair will call on Nathan Griffin from the New Hampshire Cannabis Party, who's in support of the bill. Oh, sorry.
Push the button.
Yeah, make sure you push the red button.
Oh, does that work now? Oh, good.
Yeah.
I have a little material just to hand out in support of one of the points I want to make.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to provide a little bit of hopefully helpful information on this particular bill. Generally speaking, I would say that this is a workable first prototype of a cannabis legalization program for New Hampshire. It's not perfect. It's got a bunch of warts. I think there's aspects of it of policy that could be improved, but it does appear that one of the features of this amendment is that it does give a significant amount of discretion over the next couple of years to the Liquor Commission. My understanding and knowledge is that they've actually put in a fair amount of work in studying this industry over the last year in particular. They've gotten up to speed, that they would be committed to making this successful, both for the state in terms of revenue, as well as the general lifting the general prosperity of a lot of New Hampshire residents. And so I think that that gives us the opportunity to, make this even more efficient and productive than some of the specifics within the bill. So generally speaking, I would say that it's a pretty good initial start, and I would be in favor of, with a couple of minor harmonizing improvements, to recommend that this bill, pass and we get started on, a proper cannabis legalization program in New Hampshire. So the couple of points that I wanted to make are that there is some obsolete language and a couple of things in here that could really throw a bit of a monkey wrench into into implementation. Some of which I think has been highlighted by others, but one thing that is kind of important, and this is related to the handout that I sent out, is that for up until about a year ago, there was a lot of confusion in the industry and in government with regard to cannabis seeds and hemp seeds. Nobody really had clarity as to whether it was really cannabis and whether it needed to be only sold, let's say, by dispensaries and licensed operators, or whether it was more like hemp. Given my own background in cannabis banking and payments and financial services, it was a very bedeviling thing in which, to be perfectly frank, bankers were more comfortable banking dispensaries and cultivators than they were people who were selling seeds, because it was in such a gray area. However, since the original language that I think has still been kept with regard to seeds, particularly saying that the seeds would have to be made to not be able to germinate and so on. The DEA finally came out with clear guidance on this. That's the material that I sent out. There's an article from a trade publication that summarizes that, as well as the actual guidance letter that was received by somebody who inquired of the DEA. And their basic conclusion was that cannabis products or cannabis plant materials that are under the 0.3% THC by dry weight definition that they have, that the feds have applied to hemp, are considered hemp. And this was very clarifying, especially from a banking and payments point of view, because now what was able to happen, and in fact, our own professional experience was that we were able to get a lot of clarification, and banks were now able to provide normal financial services and banking to folks who were producing and selling seeds, because now they could basically treat it from a compliance point of view as hemp. So I would like to just call people's attention to, it's, well, I don't, it's actually on page 3 of the handout, but it's basically 318-F :1 definitions, Roman numeral 2. There are some references to seeds, sterilized seed of the plant that is incapable of germination. All this is basically obsolete language, and I think that if we leave it in here, it's going to create some contradictions that can result in confusion and disputes that are entirely unnecessary. So I would just urge you guys in the working session to kind of just harmonize the current federal guidance and regulatory on cannabis seeds and hemp seeds to be just included in the broad category of hemp, which is basically the way it's treated by bankers and financial service agencies and the government at this point. And that way, if we, to whatever extent we are, and there is reference in here to regulating, hemp by the commission, that both cannabis seeds and hemp seeds be just considered to be, hemp products and regulated to whatever extent they are on that kind of basis. The other thing is that, I would like to say that because there does seem to be within this amendment a fair amount of discretion that the Liquor Commission would have in actually executing and operating this kind of hybrid state model, that it would probably be a better idea if we have any ambition of actually getting this through in the next 3 weeks before the end of the legislative session, that we kind of limit any amendments and corrections to just kind of harmonize language, make sure things are consistent, and minimize the number of tweaks and fixes, even though there are a number of smaller and medium-sized things that would probably be better to include in the bill. And the reason for that, I think, is that if we send too many changes over to the Senate, that even if they may be inclined to work through it, they're not really going to have time, and so a lot of our efforts will really come to naught this year. So my recommendation there would be that we limit the number of amendments and changes to things that are kind of grammatically or harmonizingly important, and not give them too much on their plate to have to digest, because we could run out the clock there. And to that point, one thing that I think that we should have some concern about, and that is it's less of an issue. I think it's good public policy that we have annulment or expungement of criminal records for people who have, had not large-scale cartel-type dealers, but people who have had relatively small brushes with the law with regard to cannabis up to this point, that would be good public policy. But I don't think that it's absolutely mandatory in an entire private commercial environment. But I think one of the problems that we're going to run into, and this could really derail this entirely, is to have the state engage in activities and practices that, let's say, 6 or 12 months before, people have paid legal prices and had consequences and jail time and have a criminal record, or that contradiction could result in lawsuits and other issues like that. So I would certainly suggest that there is some process by which people can obtain, expungement of their records. And my suggestion is it might be less burdensome on the state if that was.
But like you said, there's some things we can do today with this bill, and some things we might have to.
Okay, I was just making that suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, if you do,
We are aware of the problem, but that probably needs to come after we've done something first.
Okay, well, again, I'm just concerned that, that it, could derail things because people could be, feel that that contradiction was, unjust.
So,
Anyway, that's,
great.
all I had to add.
All right, thank you very much. Chris, thank you. Chair will call on Sue Holland.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today. The purpose of this testimony is not to reiterate the numerous ways in which recreational marijuana negatively impacts the states in which it is legalized. That information's been presented to the committee, it's presented to the House, it's been presented to the Senate, and yet here we are. We keep trying, even though we don't want to accept the data and science that's out there on that. The focus of this testimony is actually to discuss the amendment for this amendment and to discuss the two key additions that I saw in the bill. They've already been brought up, and I'll just quickly go over page 5, line 19. It adds to the definition of a cannabis store is operated by the state of New Hampshire. The other addition to this that was not included in the original HB 39 language. The second thing that I saw was page 7, lines 23 through 35. There's 3 new sections, sections 1, 2, and 3. What these additions do is they identify that all cannabis stores will be operated by the state. It carves out an operating system where decision-making of this program goes directly through the Liquor Commission and bypasses administrative rulemaking with legislative oversight. And it gives the commission authority to contract almost all aspects of this new business with private contractors. What this is doing is this is actually giving the imprimatur of having a state-run recreational marijuana program while quietly allowing private marijuana businesses to be the ones to nearly sustain the whole operation. Seems to me it's a bit of a quasi version of last session's 1598 without the state banking system and also without the liability protections for marijuana retail employees. These additions to the language are significant, and they rate being discussed in a more public fashion, in a more open fashion, rather than having them buried into the text of a multi-page amendment. These changes actually make the amendment look like it was a rushed attempt to respond to Governor Sununu's request for recreational marijuana bill that he very mistakenly feels will legalize this drug in a way that can be controlled and doesn't harm Granite Staters. Through the governor's flip-flop on recreational marijuana in the 9th hour of the legislative session, to this committee's willingness to jam in this bill that's already been shot down in the Senate, and to the amendment language, actually, that quietly changes some very fundamental parts of this, of the intent of this language, it's clear that this isn't any way to legislate. The whole scenario tells me that this committee is no longer doing the will of the people. It's trying to do an end round around the Senate. And instead of spending the last weeks finalizing some of the bills, it's looking to play politics with legislation. I apologize if that offends anybody, but it just seems like it. This is wrong. It shouldn't be happening. This amendment should be a standalone bill that is introduced next year so that it can be discussed properly and out in the open. And I know that some of the discussion today was on labeling and on dosing. And I just wanted to add to that I'm glad that Mr. Holt discussed labeling and dosing, and that was a comment that you all had. Labeling and dosing for the medical marijuana program is currently not as adequate as it should be, and there needs to be more patient education. That was identified in Senate Bill 180. It was successfully passed in the Senate, and then this bill took that the Consumer Protection Bill and retained it. It was a good bill, and it actually deserves your second look. It actually deserves to be moved forward if public health oversight is your main goal. I would like to say in closing, I just have one request, and I've not heard this today, but in all of the discussion about recreational marijuana, the one thing that people keep saying is that they're doing it for the will of the people because there's overwhelming public demand. Well, there's not. And we know that the UNH poll that always gets cited is flawed. And the better poll to be looking at would be Emerson College, which shows that a majority of New Hampshire residents actually are not clamoring for legalization. And it's time for legislators to stop using people as human shields so you can justify marijuana for state profit. If public demand was the utmost importance of everything you do, the 9 people in this room would have voted for parental rights, because 80% of families and parents want that. Nearly 80. Well, thank you. All I'm saying is that don't use the will of the people as an excuse. I respectfully request that you do not advance this amendment. Ushering legislation this way is wrong, and the behavior only communicates to the public view that this is a legislative game and not a serious effort to have a discussion on a solemn topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair will call on Matt Simon from Prime ATC.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, is it not customary to ask after someone testifies if there are any questions? Or are we
Did
dispensing
you
with
have
that
a
today?
question? I'm sorry. I looked around. I didn't see anybody's
Okay,
hand up.
I didn't, well, do we have to signify by raising hands before you ask for questions?
I will make sure that I ask.
Okay, I'm just asking procedurally if we're not
Yeah.
going to have questions.
No, I
It
thought
was just an oversight, okay, thank you.
had an oversight. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Matt Simon, I represent Prime ATC. You all know me by now, been here several times this year. I felt a little bit like Charles Dickens trying to decide how to testify on this bill. As the best of amendments, it was the worst of amendments. Not entirely sure what we're talking about here, so I'll comment on 2 ways that this could be interpreted. I'm guilty of having read page 4, lines 30 and 31, where it says a dual use certificate means a license allowing an alternative treatment center to co-locate with and operate a retail cannabis store. And certainly, thank you. As I said, page 4, lines 30, 31 say dual use certificates mean a license allowing an alternative treatment center to co-locate with and operate a retail cannabis store. So we were taking that at its word and believing that this was an attempt to actually create a workable compromise between the state control model and a model that included private sales. So if that is what we're talking about, I think we're talking about a potentially workable compromise. If we're talking about as a system that is only state-run stores, I think we're talking about an unworkable boondoggle that we would have no choice but to absolutely oppose for the reasons we opposed House Bill 1598 last year. So I want to back up a little bit, having made that comment. I want to say I appreciate the comments that have come from the corner office, focusing on harm reduction, and that the primary goal of cannabis regulation should be to reduce harms. That has been my message for the last 15 years. There are harms associated with prohibition that can only be resolved and addressed via responsible regulation. So evaluating this amendment on that basis, would the amendment actually reduce harms? Well, it would reduce some harms. Any legalization bill would reduce some harms because adults would no longer be fined or arrested for cannabis possession. That's why there's so much impetus to get this done. Thousands of Granite Staters are driving across the border, coming back with cannabis. They're being fined and arrested. It's unjust. It should end tomorrow. There are a whole other set of harms that are prohibition-related harms. These are harms that you can only end if you create a functional regulatory system and create a market that actually works. Would this bill create a functional regulated market for cannabis? In my opinion, it would not. If it is amended to clearly allow sales by ATCs and agency stores, then probably yes. If it's limited to state-run stores, the most likely result is that it will be, as I said, an unworkable boondoggle. So what I've given you as written testimony is an op-ed published by my former colleague Karen O'Keefe at the Marijuana Policy Project. It ran in the Concord Monitor today. I hope every member of the General Court will take time to read this op-ed, because Karen is an attorney who has been dealing with the intersection of federal and state cannabis policies for about 20 years. She has seen every state that has thought about going down this road to state-run stores try it on, sounds like a good idea, and then you get a few steps down the road and they all back out. They all stop because it is a direct conflict with federal law. It's very different for a state to pass a law that merely licenses private entities to risk federal arrest and prosecution, because make no mistake, that is what we're doing. To be engaging in this business is to commit federal crimes. So these can either be done. There is federal protection in the form of a budget amendment, but we are dealing with a situation where cannabis is still illegal under federal law. And we have a federal policy that tolerates state cannabis sales as long as they're regulated. But no state has taken the step of actually running its own stores, and I simply don't believe they will. I think the most likely outcome is they won't do it, and there won't be any stores. So we have expressed repeatedly a willingness to compromise on this. We demonstrated during the process for 639. We're perfectly willing to accept the Liquor Commission as a regulatory agency. They have zero experience with cannabis. As far as I know, they've never touched a cannabis plant. But we're willing to trust that they can deal with the steep learning curve that will exist and do this if the law is written correctly, as we thought 639 was. We're willing to accept even that state-run stores can be part of a successful statewide policy. But what we cannot accept is that excluding ATCs from retail sales is in any way consistent with the principles of harm reduction. The Therapeutic Cannabis Program is a harm reduction program. Our mission is harm reduction. We dispense cannabis. We've been doing it for 6.5 years. The 3 ATCs between them have about 20 years experience dispensing cannabis in compliance with strict regulations. The last few years, we've had oversight from 11 medical professionals on the Therapeutic Cannabis Medical Oversight Board. We've been under a microscope since day one. The opponents who fought against therapeutic cannabis have been waiting for the single slightest screw up so they can come in here and try to take our program away, try to clamp down on it. There have been no reports of problems associated with the ATCs and their dispensing of cannabis. We've been a model of successful, very limited model, but a model of successful regulation. And as Mr. Holt said, if this bill amendment were to pass as is, the most likely result, well, there are two sets of likely result. One is that it won't be implemented, in which case you've got a boondoggle. The other is that it is actually implemented successfully, and maybe interstate commerce happens and you can import cannabis from somewhere else. Well, we don't need the ATCs anymore. We don't need the Therapeutic Cannabis Program anymore. We're just going to have state-run stores, and that's going to be the way. So we can't sit idly by and pretend that that's okay, wiping away everything that we've worked for to build a successful therapeutic cannabis program over the last 7 years. Everything that Prime ATC's staff has worked hard for would be placed in serious risk. So since this committee did not consider HB 1598, that was in the Criminal Justice Committee last year, I'd like to hit a few of the talking points that I hit a lot last year when we were dealing with 1598. There's a lot of people who love the state liquor stores, and it's easy to understand why if you like alcohol. You walk into a state liquor store, you see rum from Jamaica, you see the best bourbon from Kentucky, you see sake from Japan. Representative Almey's favorite wine is always there, unless they have a bad year, and then it's not there. But the product selection is amazing. The prices are lower than neighboring states. It's very consumer friendly. So people might assume that a state-run cannabis store will be similar. The only way it can be similar is if interstate commerce happens and you're able to import California and Oregon and all these other states' products. We can't assume that will happen next year. We have no idea when that might happen. Until it happens, cannabis markets have to be entirely intrastate. which means no product will be on the shelf of the state-run cannabis store unless a New Hampshire business produced that product. Now, what kind of business is going to invest money in a program where the most likely result is it's not even going to be implemented and we're going to spend a bunch of money and not be able to bring our products to market? That sounds like a recipe for absolute disaster, financial ruin for businesses, policy embarrassment for the state. It is not appealing to us in any way. As has been said, if growers and processors don't like the prices offered by the state, it's a crime to sell to literally anybody else. If you're a distiller in New Hampshire, you can sell your New Hampshire-made rum to anybody in the world that wants to buy it. But if you're a cannabis grower in New Hampshire and you don't like the deal you're getting from the Liquor Commission, you're suddenly going to feel like a farmer in the former Soviet Union because you have no recourse. And if you do sell it outside the system, that would be a felony, and you might wind up in the New Hampshire equivalent of a gulag. Let's not go down this road, please, Mr. Chairman. So with regard to the therapeutic cannabis program, we've already reached a point of basically stagnant growth. It's because cannabis is available across the border in every direction in cheap stores. The prices have plummeted because there are hundreds of producers. Maine is essentially the wild northeast of cannabis. There are hundreds and hundreds of very lightly regulated medical cannabis producers. Little known fact, they don't even require independent lab testing in the therapeutic cannabis market in Maine. So that's a cost that's imposed on New Hampshire ATCs that is not imposed on Maine operators. We face a number of major operating disadvantages relative to less heavily regulated businesses in neighboring states. We want effective regulation. We want it for adult use just as we want it for therapeutic cannabis. This amendment doesn't do it unless we are talking about a version that allows ATCs to sell cannabis. So if we are, happy to discuss compromise, and if not, it's really nice outside. Let's enjoy the beautiful weather and see what happens in a study commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative Philo.
Thank you for your testimony. You mentioned that two possible outcomes of this bill would be either that we pass it and decide to not go through with it, or that the therapeutic cannabis program were to fall apart as a result of this bill being passed. Would a third possible outcome be that we actually pass the bill, implement it, and that somebody with standing were to sue in the federal courts, the entire program becomes enjoined, and the state has tar on its face as a result of having a program that it passed be enjoined by the federal government?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I did not mean to suggest that there are only two possible outcomes. I think the outcome you describe is contained within the first outcome of it won't be implemented and will be a boondoggle. Thank you.
Okay, we do have more questions. Representative Burrows.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. I just want to understand your position. I know where you're at with the ATCs and the retail outlet. Are you also envisioning other types of retail stores being run by entrepreneurs?
Thank you for the question. As you know, we advocated for HB 639, which would have created a robust free market approach to cannabis. We have never asked for special treatment at all. We want to create a fair market. That bill would have allowed adult use businesses to serve the therapeutic cannabis program if they got a therapeutic cannabis endorsement. We put a lot of thought how to make this not special treatment for the ATCs. But we're, that being said, not going to stand idly by while something passes that would wipe out our program and take away our reason to exist. And we think it would do that if it restricts, or if it doesn't allow ATC sales.
Further question?
Yeah, and just to clarify again, you're saying no to state-run cannabis stores?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
I thought we were here to talk about a potential compromise. The amendment, as I read it, would have been an improvement over HB 1598. It would have allowed both privately owned agency stores, which I knew nothing about until I started reading about them, but they would be privately owned and operated, but very much tied into the state system. And that would be one option. And allowing ATCs to engage in private sales would be another option. I thought we were talking about a hybrid approach that would allow some ATC stores, some agency stores, some state-run stores, if in fact they are viable, and that we would be talking about a viable compromise.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Representative McAleer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last night, we, as representatives, also got a letter from Karen O'Keefe. And I thought you were sort of going there because she talked about a safety valve to get out. Have you read this particular letter?
I have.
But you sort of didn't go there. Could you explain how that would work?
Well, it's not my position to advocate for a safety valve. I worked for that organization for 10 years, and Karen's a good friend of mine, former colleague, but her ask was twofold: either have a safety valve or allow private sales by ATCs. From our perspective, if it's just a safety valve, it's not sufficient to save the therapeutic cannabis program. If the state stores were to become operational, if interstate commerce were to become viable, we would be wiped out.
Representative Gibbs.
Thank you. Doesn't this amendment provide for dual use licenses so that ATCs could also do recreational cannabis business?
Thank you for the question, Representative. That is exactly what it says on page 4, line 30 and 31, and there are references throughout the bill to dual use certificates and dispensing and things like that. But there are also 2 places in the bill where it says all retail stores shall be run by the state. I initially thought the intent was the workable compromise, and there have been amendments suggested to clean up that language and make it clear that the compromise version is what was actually intended. But what I've been hearing this morning is not that. So again, it is the best of amendments, and it is the worst of amendments.
So the question there is, if there was a compromise, then we would have to create a tax for you.
I didn't say that we need to create a tax. I said that we need to have a system. There needs to be some imagination because the state's
Right.
planning to extract revenue from cannabis sales without having a tax. So there is probably a way to do that within the
Well,
context
the only
of
other
this
way we've done
compromise.
it through liquor is we have agency stores, but those agency stores are getting the product wholesale through the commission, so they're paying a markup. If you know, in other words, if you that let me put it this way, you couldn't be a cultivator and a retailer because the cultivator provides the product to the commission, then the commission would provide the product back to the ATC. So that would be the problem you'll have to figure out in the next week.
Well, I don't know that I'm the one that needs to figure it out, Mr. Chairman, but it seems to me that we would be selling products other than the ones that we produce, and the products we produce would be coming from the Liquor Commission system, and therefore it would already be the profit or tax
Right.
or whatever, the revenue would already be extracted before we get it. I don't know how it would handle the products we produce, whether we would have to sell them to the Liquor Commission and buy them back to sell to adults. I don't know. That's at least viable in concept. Cutting us out of sales is not viable.
Fair enough. Okay. You know, anybody else have any more questions? Great. Thank you very much. We're behind on time, so I ask people who, when they come up, could you please be a model of brevity. Next up is Jim Riddle, who supports the bill. You the hemp farmer?
I am.
Okay.
Tried not to look like a farmer today.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, my name's Jim Riddle, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for holding this hearing. I also I live in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, and I serve as a policy advisor for NHCAN, the New Hampshire Cannabis Association. But the comments I offer today are on my own behalf.
Fair enough.
I do hold a USDA hemp grower license. I'm holding it right now. To produce seeds. But under my license requirements, USDA rules, I have to destroy any plant materials that exceed 0.3% THC. And I can do that by burying them, burning them, composting them, and I love making compost, so that's not a problem. Seeds are what I'm interested in. And the DEA, as mentioned previously, has officially determined that any cannabis seeds, regardless of their genetic potential, are hemp. They don't contain THC. That is one part of your bill in the definition of cannabis that should be amended by removing seeds. Seeds belong in the definition and description of hemp that's in that definition of cannabis. And seed growers should not be regulated under any cannabis. We're already regulated under the USDA hemp program. But I'm ready to invest in craft cannabis and turn those byproducts, that compost, into valuable product, but only in a open, competitive market. So on May 6th and 7th, my wife and I, to celebrate our 38th wedding anniversary, attended the Vermont Cannabis and Hemp Expo near Burlington. I was really impressed by the turnout. There were well over 2,000 people in attendance. But what really impressed me was the exhibitors. There were over 120 exhibits, and the number and variety of businesses that are supporting cannabis is what I expected to see cultivators and dispensaries, but there were bankers with booths, insurance companies, greenhouse builders, farm suppliers, labeling, packaging companies, security services, web designers, seed companies, cosmetics, accounting, engineering, state agencies, universities, and much more. And the whole expo was just a buzz, and I don't mean that as people being buzzed. It was a buzz of economic activity. People were making deals, all over the place. And it was really encouraging to see. And I even met people from New Hampshire that were there investing in the Vermont market. Now, that's money that's just going out of state, just like all the consumers that are driving across the borders and then driving back. But I've been, listening to the debate here in the legislature, and one of the most promising things I've learned is research showing that cannabis legalization has been shown repeatedly now to decrease dependency on opioids. And one of the studies, the title is Cannabis Significantly Reduces the Use of Prescription Opioids and Improves the Quality of Life in Authorized Patients, Results of a Large Prospective Study. And that study concluded the high rate of cannabis use for chronic pain and the subsequent reductions in opioid use suggest that cannabis may play a harm reduction role in the opioid overdose crisis, potentially improving the quality of life of patients and overall public health. With your leadership, we have a chance to help stop, at least put a good dent in New Hampshire's opioid epidemic. We can keep the cannabis dollars in our state while capturing revenue for drug abuse prevention and treatment. We have a chance to stop unnecessary arrests and incarceration and redirect police resources to focus on real crimes. We can provide income for farmers and businesses and stimulate economic activity if done right. Now, finally, I urge you to amend the bill that you're considering to allow home cultivation. I know that's a steep hill, but especially for medical cannabis patients. And HB 611 already passed the House. It's been tabled by the Senate. I think it's really important that especially medical patients have the ability to choose what varieties, what strains, what balance is best for them. And I think the ATCs do a great job, but they aren't everywhere. It's a big hassle and cost, and also just not available for people to always drive to them or to find what they're looking for. And there's been comment that you can't grow good cannabis outdoors in New Hampshire. And that's just simply not true. In fact, more and more research in the cannabis trade is showing that outdoor, sun-grown, that gets exercise from the wind, that gets attacked by pests, actually produces much more balanced terpenes. Those are like the flavor profile of cannabis. That's what has different effects. Whereas indoor grown is like comparing a tomato from a greenhouse to one that was grown outdoors in your healthy soil in your garden. It's just has much more complexity. And you certainly, there are varieties that will finish in 120 day. If you can grow peaches, you can grow pot. Okay, thank you.
We learn something new every day. Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Representative McAleer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick clarification. When you say that homegrown pot, are you talking about only people that have a medical card or anybody?
Well, there's a bill, and thank you for your question. There's a bill that's tabled by the Senate that would only allow medical card holders. That would be a good place to start because that bill already exists. It's been heard, and the Senate didn't kill it. They tabled it. So that's a good starting point. But to me, if there's going to be a monopoly run by the state and the ATCs, that's not much variety. I think the compromise, the balance is, okay, seeds are already in interstate commerce. I can order any seed I want. The post office will deliver it because the DEA has said seeds are hemp. And so people can get seeds. It's not a problem to get seeds of any kind of strain you want. That interstate commerce is already happening there. So why not balance the state control, state making money, ATCs making the money with people having freedom, liberty to make their own choices. So but start with the medical because the bill already exists. Thank you.
Representative Below.
Yeah, my only question is, you support the bill?
Like the previous speaker, I have mixed feelings. I support legalization. I do not support a Soviet-style state-run monopoly. Now, if the ATCs can stay in it, and especially if you can allow medical homegrown, I think you got a good bill.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Heather Brown, you didn't put in any time, but can you promise me you'll be quick?
I promise.
And not say anything new or different, or say only things new, and nothing.
I tend not to put a time because, you know, sometimes you give me more than 30 seconds and I appreciate it. So,
I've never been known to cut anybody off, but don't be the first.
so
Proceed.
I would like to say that I appreciate the efforts that individuals have made at tackling the issue regarding legalization. Unfortunately, literally, I believe sorry.
Don't worry about the lines. Just give us the point.
No, I just want to tell you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for my opportunity. Literally lines 1 through 28 are excellent in this bill. The rest of the bill should be tossed. This is an awful amendment. This is horrible. Line 29 on the first page actually states that no one other than the state would be able to be involved in the retail sales of cannabis. Has a member of the Therapeutic Cannabis Medical Oversight Board. I believe that this bill, this amendment jeopardizes the future of the therapeutic cannabis program. It puts all of our patients at risk. It puts our ATCs at risk. It opens up a door for patients to have to resort to the black market or to traveling over state lines more so than what they are already doing. I do not think New Hampshire should be going backwards in regards to cannabis. I think we should be moving forward. I do not believe this bill moves forward for everyone that would potentially utilize cannabis, whether they are a patient or not. I think that it is appreciated by all of us, and there is nobody in this room that wants legalization more than what I do, but this is not the way to do it. Jeopardizing one group of people for the sake of the state being able to make a little extra money is inappropriate. I, as a patient, if I lose the therapeutic cannabis program, then I myself would be forced either to revert back to crossing state lines or into the black market, because even the system proposed in this bill would not be able to allow me to treat my medical conditions in the same way that I have been treating them for the last several years. I should not be put into that position, neither should any other patient within the state. I have to agree, although I appreciated his statements on allowing medical home grow. I don't think that this bill would allow that as an option, or that that's even a thought for it. I believe that really at this point, I mean, I know that the governor came around and made the statements that he made, and I know that another individual said, you know, you shouldn't hide behind doing it for the people. Well, I am one of your people, and I do want legalization, but I do not want it in this fashion. I believe that the individuals that should be able to participate in this market are the citizens of New Hampshire. If you're worried about creating a marijuana mile, like we've seen in many other states, then please put licensing caps in. Put caps in regards to how many particular businesses can be allowed in a particular area. Do it that way. It is very possible. Make New Hampshire unappealing to out-of-state large cannabis corporations that would come in here and decimate the market, just like they have done in Maine, just like they have done in Massachusetts, and just like they have done out in California and Colorado and many other areas. You know, if you want New Hampshire to be different than the rest of the nation that has legalized, then let's put caps. Let's put restrictions. Let's not allow every individual to be able to have a license, to be able to open a business. Put the restrictions in that way. Don't make it so that the only people that are allowed to participate sufficiently and successfully within cannabis in New Hampshire is the state itself. That's doing an injustice to the people that you are here to represent.
Okay. Oh, Representative Herbert.
My question is, how many stores do we have in the system?
We have 100 liquor stores.
100, give or take. So we have a cap on how many stores can have marijuana if this passes this way.
We're
You
not
have
going to
100
sell
stores.
marijuana in the liquor stores. They would be new standalone stores.
Why aren't we? Okay, that's a good. I did not know that. I thought the stores were going to be
No,
a
no,
portion of a state liquor store.
no. They're going to be standalone stores. That's
Why aren't you putting? it
okay.
in?
Okay. There's,
Okay, there is a cap in my mind, and maybe I'm incorrect, but take the 100 stores. Now they're standalones, I find out, and that is a cap. And I understand that if a city like Manchester says, we don't want them, they can't be in Manchester. And so I'm a little confused as to your point of view that we have a cap, a number, but it's not the right number for you.
No, my point was in reference to if you allowed a system where private citizens could participate in the cannabis market, where they could be the ones to sell it retail, produce, cultivate, and manufacture. This bill does not allow it. If private citizens were allowed to enter the market, that is where it would also be necessary to take care of some of these concerns and worries that individuals have raised by instilling caps, by creating a restriction on how many of what business can be allowed in any particular area.
One more question, please. Is any of the states that have accepted, made marijuana legal, are any of those states have the retail orientation we have here in New Hampshire?
Nobody's done it this way, but
Okay.
no other state has caps either.
Actually,
I mean, they're saying all these terrible things, and I'm going, well, these states don't have regulation.
actually, to form a correction,
Okay.
a lot of the other states do have caps
You do have
in
caps, okay.
regards, but it's more on the municipality level. And you will find that a lot of the communities that are more free and open with cannabis will allow more cannabis businesses.
Right.
So say, just as an example, in Lebanon, there are licensing caps in Lebanon, but with the way that their Lebanon, Maine, with the way that their rules and their laws are written, the only place that retail businesses are allowed is on 202. So that is why you have, quote unquote, a marijuana mile on 202. It's because that is the
That's how
only
they
place
zoned it.
Lebanon allows retail business.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, I only have a couple more cards left, so again, I urge everyone to be as brief as possible. Frank Knack from the ACLU.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Frank Kinnack. I'm the Policy Director with the ACLU of New Hampshire.
You might want to take your
Excuse me, I
mask
can't
off.
Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Thank you.
I'm the Policy Director with the ACLU of New Hampshire. For Chairman Hunt, thank you so much for bringing this amendment. We think this is an issue that is important and cannot be kicked down the road. We also, appreciate the leadership of both parties in the House for their efforts to push this through this session. We agree. So I think you all received amendments from Paul Toomey. I think 2 of the 4 were included in this, and we suggest that you incorporate the other 2. I think those would address the issues that you've heard concerns around thus far. But I want to back this up. A lot of the conversation we've heard today has been around money and revenue and who's going to make what and where that money's going to go. And I think I really want to back it up to the fact that we really agree with what the governor said 2 Fridays ago when he talked about this is not about money, this is about harm reduction. And in addition to harm reduction, from our perspective, this is about racial justice. And so I just want to give you all some data points. Marijuana is that perfect issue where we can compare apples to apples in the criminal legal system because we know as a baseline that black people and white people use marijuana at roughly the same rate. Yet nationally, black people are 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession. So stark racial disparity nationally. In New Hampshire, it's even worse. In New Hampshire, according to the most recent data, I think from 2021, and so this is UCR data that agencies give to FBI, black people are 4.6 times more likely to be arrested than white people. And this is, again, the state's own data. So this is fundamentally about racial justice and righting a wrong. And if we're talking about, we don't have perfect right now, and we're just going to kick this can down the road, what we're doing is kicking can down the road of this racial injustice that's happening every day in New Hampshire. In addition, we're still arresting, again, according to the most recent data, over 1,100 people every single year in our state for simple possession of marijuana. And so while we've heard oftentimes in testimony that many of these people are no longer going to jail, all of those people are being unnecessarily brought into our criminal legal system and having the possibility of jail time, but also the fines and fees that are associated with an arrest that can have devastating collateral consequences. They also leave you with a criminal record. So when you're trying to get a job, when you're trying to get housing, even child custody issues, marijuana possession can be problematic. And before this, so because there's no like easy way to find all the various collateral consequences, there's some great clearinghouses. So I looked at the National Inventory of Collateral Consequences of Conviction, which is a great national clearinghouse that tracks all state level collateral consequences. And I went to New Hampshire and looked at just misdemeanor mandatory collateral consequences. So there could be additional because it's a drug, but just looking at mandatory collateral consequences that attach if you have a misdemeanor conviction, we have 99 separate collateral consequences, which is absolutely ridiculous. And so every time we talk about postponing and not dealing with this now for these 1,100 plus people who we're still arresting every single year, the collateral consequences, the fines, the fees, the harms, the racial injustice because of our disparities track with that. And so from our perspective, we can no longer kick this can down the road. We appreciate the leadership's effort to get this done. We think this is a good amendment. There's some few small tweaks that we hope that you all will incorporate that I know Paul Toomey has emailed to the members. We hope that you'll do that, and happy to answer any questions.
Representative Gibbs.
Thank you. Just for clarity, you mentioned that 1,100 people every year, approximately 1,100, are arrested for marijuana possession, and that is after decriminalization. Am I correct?
Yes. So
Thank
that is 2021 data, FBI UCR data.
And that was after decriminalization?
Yes, that was, I think, back in 2018.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, got 3 cards left. Kevin Pratt, who's opposed to the bill. And I'll hold you to the 2 minutes, please.
Get the clock going on here. I'm all set. A lot of my questions are already answered.
I
so
didn't
that-
realize it was Representative Pratt. I
How you doing?
apologize for
No,
not
that's
calling
all
you
right.
sooner.
That's all right. Will this bill be coming back to criminal justice and public safety?
No.
No, okay. First thing I needed to know. Local control, the way the bill looks, does local control lose the ability for licensing of these facilities?
No, they would be able to say to the commission, we don't want any store in our town.
Okay, good. And about growing facilities also? The same way for growing facilities? Will
Well,
they-
cultivators, yes.
Yes, the cultivators too, okay. And, well, I just wanted to make a statement that Raymond has a liquor store, so it sounds like now it doesn't have to be in the liquor store.
It's not intended to be in liquor stores.
Okay,
It's
good.
intended to be a standalone store.
Raymond doesn't want any head shops. Thank you. I'm all done.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Paul.
I had a
was-
question.
Oh,
I'm
we do
sorry.
have a question? I'm sorry. Representative Waltz has a question.
By the way.
I believe that this is an opt-in issue, correct? So I just wanted to make it, as opposed to opt-out, and it would be better for towns to be able to,
Opt-in is better.
yeah, opt-in is better, but isn't
Yeah.
this opt-out?
This is opt-in.
Oh, it is an opt-in? Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Paul Marcetti?
Good afternoon, representatives. My name is Paul Morissette, and I'm a partner in East Coast Cannabis in of Maine. We have several stores, and we're vertically integrated, so we do cultivation and manufacturing. The partners in this business are all New Hampshire boys. The CEO's here, Dana Brealey, and he's went to Concord High School, so we're not Maine people. We'd love to do business in the state of New Hampshire. Unfortunately, we're cultivators and we're manufacturers, and I wanted to go quickly through the 3 kinds of things that happen during cannabis business, and their cultivation and manufacturing and retail. So under cultivation, I think the problem with the state isn't the stores. The stores are fine. Anybody can operate a store. The problem is you're the sole buyer, and it's impossible to estimate the crop's size. So let's take cultivation, for example, right? Let's say you guys issue 20 licenses. I think I've seen that somewhere there, right? We're either going to undergrow or overgrow, and we can't tell when we're putting a crop in exactly what it's going to weigh. So basically, whether you got a state buyer or you have us giving us all the information, it's impossible to estimate the size of the crops. So your supply will either be short or worse, the supply will be in excess of the market, which will result in two outcomes. A, oversupply, which will crash the price, panic will ensue. I'm talking cultivation. Or B, at some point, organic crops will spoil and have to be destroyed since there is only one customer who doesn't need or want that product. Bankruptcies of licensed cultivators will ensue, costing untold millions to private businesses who trusted the state system that failed. Lawsuits probably will be inevitable. The only way to avoid this scenario is for the state to contractually agree to buy everything a grower can produce, which of course will bankrupt the Liquor Commission. Next, manufacturing. Most manufacturers, one of the products they make is gummies and other common products. But the state will have limited space for each product on their stores, in their stores. And since there won't be room for everyone's brand of gummies, much will be destroyed along with other products, bankrupting manufacturers who trusted the state system that failed. There's no way to control supply. There's no way to control what you need to have. Like cultivation, the only way to avoid this scenario is for the state to buy all products manufacturers produce, which of course will bankrupt the Liquor Commission. You'll be taking the risk instead of us. Retail. Since the state sets the price to pay for all products, there is no incentive to develop new or high-quality products. Your state stores will be stocked with low and mid-grade at best products. Cultivators and manufacturers have no incentive to develop new or better products since the state will set the price and may not even want the product in their stores. So my position is this can't fly because it's not feasible for the supply chain that they have set up. We set up grows in Maine for millions and millions of dollars, okay? And I'm going to trust the state buyer to come in and give me a fair price for my product. And understand, these flower products, they aren't all the same. Outdoors, relatively cheap. And then there's different grades and types and strains of indoors by the hundreds and thousands. Depends on the quality. It's like buying wine. So I have a hard time figuring how a state person is going to come in and negotiate after I spent $7 million to put up a grow, how in the world I'm going to come to a price with him with the cannabis. The other problems is it's state to state. If he uses Massachusetts, for example, Massachusetts recently crashed, oversupplied. Maine's having some of the same problem, right? Where's the price going to come that he's going to pay me? Based on a failed market or based on a New Hampshire market, which he doesn't know what to pay for? And why would he pay me a lot? He's going to push me down, you know? And you're going to get to the point where nobody's making money. We've talked to many growers across many states, and you can ask Matt Simon, I think he told me he has too. I haven't found one person. We'd love to be part of this in our own state, but we cannot justify spending millions and millions of dollars to put up a cannabis cultivation and manufacturing to supply the state who's going to decide whether they're going to buy it at all, and if they do, what they're going to pay me for my product. Can you think of any other business where that happens? It certainly don't happen in the Liquor Commission. Smirnoff ain't telling, you know, we ain't telling Smirnoff what to pay for the vodka. So my problem with this is I want to see legalization here. I want to participate, and this just structurally is not going to work. And the state's going to buy the liability when this all fails. And that's basically it. Questions?
Representative Gibbs.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one is basically yes or no, and I should point out that I grew up in an agricultural family. Isn't agriculture a risky type of business?
Oh, absolutely. We all know you can go down and buy some tomatoes and plant them on the side of your deck. But if I asked you how many pounds you're going to get out of those tomatoes when you're done, you can't tell me that. We have other problems, like we get bugs and the crop has to be destroyed, or mold, or something like that, or pathogens. In Maine, we're tested at the recreational level. They mentioned before there's no testing in Maine. That's medical. But we're tested for everything.
Okay, second question.
For the question, may inquire.
Thank you. How would you propose to correct the problem that you describe?
throw this bill in the trash and start over with a good bill that has an open natural market for the live free or die state, and allow stores and the ATCs and anybody else that wants to get in business. We'd suggest smaller tiering of licenses, okay, to not bring the big corporate guys that you're talking in here, so cultivation, is smaller, and to have a free and open market, just like we do with everything else in the state. And, that's it.
Are you suggesting that we put limits on how much they cultivate?
I'm not suggesting.
What would you
no,
just said? What did you just say for a limitation?
No, I didn't say that.
Well, that's what it sounded like.
Okay,
So what was your saying that small?
Well, we'd like to have a lot of smaller businesses participate in this.
So how do we make a business? How do we ensure that?
How do we ensure that?
Yeah, how do we-
we have a free and open market, and we allow Heather.
Well, free open market means they can be as big as they want. How do we keep them? You're saying small. I don't understand.
No,
how does the state legislate that they be small?
No, I didn't dictate that they be small. I think you allow anybody. How do you dictate that they're small? You set the tiers and the sizes for the grows or the manufacturing. You limit the square footage. Or
Okay,
you
just
limit
stop
the
for
number
there.
of
Set
plants.
the tiers for the growing. In other words, we're going to tell them how much they can grow.
We're going to tell them, okay, in Maine for cultivation, right? There's 4 tiers of cultivation. You got tier 1 that's up to 500 square feet. You got tier 2 that's up to 2,000 square feet of budding space. You got tier 3, which is 7,000, and you got tier 4, which is 20,000. Okay, so the largest license in Maine is 20,000. Now, if you go to Massachusetts, okay, who has a much bigger problem, their license is 100,000. Okay, and a big company called Trulieve came in there, and they built a giant grow. 200 people worked there, over 100,000 square feet. Okay, recently in the last 5 or 6 months, the market's crashed because there's too much in the market. They had 20,000 pounds of an organic sitting on a shelf, waiting to be thrown away or destroyed. We have to have good policy. I would limit, like I think somebody else brought up, I'd say three stores from the same, you can only have ownership in 3 stores. And that'll limit a lot of the big guys from coming in because they don't want to do that. They want a big.
Okay, Representative Vincent has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks a lot for taking my question. So most likely this bill is going to have a bunch of amendments tacked onto it. Say the bill has a bunch of amendments, but it keeps the growth, but the state keeps the control. Would you be for getting this bill, at least getting your foot in the door, and when the state realizes that they're not going to make it or they're going to fail, we'd have changes to it?
So put through a bill that we physically don't think will work in the long run, and because it's something, I don't want to do
Well,
that.
listen,
I want to
it's
see
not
the
the
right
first
bill.
time that the state's done this.
So
However, remember.
Are you
with-
asking another question?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may ask one more
It was
question.
kind of the same question, but thank you very much. I appreciate it. Remember where this is coming from. With no disrespect, from the corner office. So we're trying to. That's the way it's going to pass.
Yeah, and okay,
And I'm not in disagreement with you.
Come on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm done.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
testimony.
Thank you.
All right, I got one card left. He's from Maine, Dana Beerley, and I'm sure you don't have it. Oh, that's right. You do have a store, right? Oh, you had a question? Would you believe?
It was a would you believe, I guess, but would you believe that hearing the discussion on the one hand of a live free or die model, but on the other hand, discussion of tiers and regulations and no more than 3 stores, would you believe that I'm having a difficulty reconciling the two of those? Could you describe how you reconcile, on the one hand, a live free or die model of sales, and on the other hand, what I just heard is a discussion of a very complex licensing system that seems no different than
They have a very
just getting the
complex
liquor commission
in Maine.
involved.
You're right. So that is a great would you believe. That is hard to fix that dichotomy. Okay. So it's Dana as a partner, he could probably help answer that question
I
for
can
you.
field some of these for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for hearing me.
To avoid some redundancy, I won't speak on any of the topics that Paul mentioned, but I am a Concord High graduate. I grew up here in New Hampshire and only ended up in Maine simply because they had a program that would allow me to flourish. Similar to what Matt said here, we're not asking for anything of preference. At the end of the day, we just want an even playing field, which this bill doesn't allow for in its current state. There's been a couple people that have touched on federal illegality, so I don't think I need to speak much more to that. Obviously, there's a huge conflict of interest here between what the feds want and having state employees buy and sell a federally illegal substance. 2, markets don't work with one buyer, period, in any industry. There's a reason most states set up barriers to inhibit monopolies, unlike this proposal, which requires it. What happens when the market compresses and prices plummet, as it does in all states? Representative Hunt, you mentioned negotiating wholesale contracts before building our grows, and that would be contingent on bank financing. So I'd like to dive into that a little bit. There is no institutional funding in cannabis to start. Any bank under the FDIC cannot touch us because the FDIC is federal. Majority of capital raises are done with private equity who won't negotiate a weak contract. So let's look at the timeline and costs associated. It takes about a year to get a grow built. Another 10 months until you have a crop ready because it's agriculture and that takes time. And it's about, call it $7 to $10 million in CapEx to get this stood up. And then so on those numbers, you've got about 4 years for the operator to recoup their cap expenditure. That's 5 years since the inception of the contract that you suggested that our businesses will potentially live or die by. So any somewhat savvy operator will negotiate multi-year contracts to guarantee their ROI. Retail in most states, however, experience significant compression within the first 3 years. The problem here, the state will either sustain massive losses if you negotiate long-term contracts with growers for high wholesale prices so they can recoup. Meanwhile, retail is plummeting and therefore no margins for the state-run stores. We're not on an island here. You're not just competing with New Hampshire, but Mass, Vermont, and Maine, where that price compression is already occurring. So you either sell in line with their pricing and lose a ton of state money to the cultivation contracts, or experience significant dilution to neighboring states. It's a lose-lose. Curiosity. With a show of hands, how many people here use or have shopped at a cannabis store?
You really don't think we're going to admit to that, do you?
If you travel on vacation to Maine, you buy in Maine, you use in Maine, and you leave Maine, you realize that's legal, correct?
I have driven by the Maine stores multiple times, but no, I have not stepped foot in one of them yet.
All right. So, Representative Burrows, you brought up dosing concerns. That is a great point in such a complex issue. With edibles alone, one singular lane of cannabis products, how 5 milligram affects me versus one of you has a plethora of variables. What's your metabolism like? When was your last meal? Are you hydrated? What kind of concentrate was used? Nano-emulsified concentrates are readily available and provide effects within a matter of minutes. Others take up to hours. Therefore, selling cannabis is more in line with being a sommelier than simply operating a point of sale in a liquor store or one of the new stores we're proposing to build. Our staff get trained for months, generally after coming from years of experience either as a tender or a user. Cannabis is highly complex, which is why the private sector should be able to operate. We know this inside and out, which is why our stores flourish. I'm curious to see how the state is going to train hundreds of employees to safely and knowledgeably help sell to cannabis consumers of all ages, sizes, and tolerance at the high level necessary for the safety of our customers, which has been mentioned a few times is the priority of getting this bill across the gate. Representative Hunt, you also mentioned outdoor cultivation doesn't work in New Hampshire.
I'm wrong on
Okay, I was curious, yeah, because all the neighboring states, it does very well. And I just checked in the bill and it looks
It's
like
better. It's better. They
there's-
have more tannins.
That part I do agree with. I disagree with. But at the end of the day, what makes New Hampshire unique where it couldn't, and I think that bill will actually suggest that outdoor cultivation gets 3 times the square footage of indoor operators. This is a weak bill. New Hampshire isn't Texas. It's geographically small and surrounded by legal states with robust, successful programs. There are a plethora of successful programs nationwide. Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? States like Oregon have tried that and are now the proud owners of the worst programs nationwide. What I propose is similar in line with what Paul just said. Cap it at 3 stores and cap it at 10,000 square feet of cultivation. This will deter massive out-of-state players, which ruin most markets. It will empower municipalities to opt in or opt out. That is how you control your quote unquote green miles. and you allow them to set up aggressive zoning infrastructure like they have done in multiple states that works extremely well. You're very concerned about green miles. You know how you inhibit them? You limit them to a certain area. If there's 100 liquor stores, that's way more exposure than a mile that's got 4 or 5. And you're going to have a lot more youth and whatever we're trying to deter seeing them. Is there any questions?
Representative Gibbs.
Thank you. Under this proposal, while the business goes through its growing pains, does the state stop arresting people for marijuana, and does the state stop wasting law enforcement resources on
100%.
marijuana?
100%.
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
I didn't hear your answer.
Oh, I said 100%. Yes.
Thank
Stop arresting people for cannabis offenses. Yeah.
Thank you.
Representative Philo.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm actually interested in the dosing and the minimum dosing that should be allowed, particularly in edibles and other products. The bill recommends 5. Do you actually recommend going to a microdosing? Do you think 5 is appropriate? Where would you think we should fall as a state?
There's a lot of successful programs in the 10 milligram range. I think that's a good starting number, you know, and as consumers get educated when they're in these retail stores, you know, like was mentioned before, start with 5. You know, like a lot of substances, it's tough to undo. Start small and then grow within your tolerance. Don't take out a huge bite.
Yeah, my understanding in Massachusetts, and they do have stores nearby me, is I have 2 in Winchendon, that it's 5 milligrams, but then they limit to how much you can buy on a per day basis. So there is an overall cap in terms of how much you can buy. Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, we thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, I will close the hearing on the. For the next bill, committee members, we have 7 cards. They're all 2 to 3 minutes. So if we get through, we could do them all. Everybody's in support. There's no opposition to this bill. Are you guys want to break for lunch, or want to go through this and get it done?
Mr. Chairman, can we take a 1-minute break? 1 minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we can take a 3 minutes break. 3-minute break. No. Hopefully they won't repeat themselves. Okay. All right, so we'll open up the public hearing on Senate Bill 85 and hear from Ellen Plum, MD. Okay, so we're going to hold you to your 3 minutes. What's that? Pull the mic, yeah, the red light button, and then pull it close to you. Make sure the red button, you push the button. Just push the button. It'll. There you
Got
go.
it. Okay, off to a
And,
good
and
start.
really close. You can see how
Okay.
it's.
Is that good?
There you go.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Hunt and the members of the House Committee for Commerce and Consumer Affairs. My name is Ellen Plum. I'm a family physician with the New Hampshire Academy of Family Physicians, and I'm a primary care provider. I come to you today not as an expert in policy or in government spending, but as a clinician who is faced every day with the realities of how mental illness and behavioral emergencies are dealt with within our communities. I come today to ask for your immediate support of Senate Bill 85. Our primary care on-call coverage systems were created to help patients who need basic medical guidance. They were not created to be psychiatric crisis management and stabilization strategies. And yet, suicidal patients frequently call these services first, knowing that they will reliably be connected to a provider. Healthcare settings across the state are increasingly understaffed. The workforce needed to adequately triage clinical requests results in delayed access to point-of-care services, a concerning reality when considering a potentially life-threatening scenario like suicide. I work in a clinic with behavioral health clinical teams that can support my work and my patients. But this is far from the standard practice across the state, where patients have limited access to adequate services to meet their needs. Psychiatric complexity feels to be increasing in my patient community, as are psychosocial determinants of suicidality, such as chronic stress, financial insecurity, and housing instability. This is a reality that our primary care infrastructure and workforce was simply not designed to sustain, and yet we are asked to do so on a daily basis. Primary care providers have neither the time nor the training to safely and competently stabilize a suicidal patient over the phone. We are unable to see them on the demand, and we certainly cannot travel to meet them where they are at. Yet we are routinely called upon to intervene when a patient calls our clinic in crisis. We desperately need to consider sustainable alternatives to fund programs like the ones described in SB 85, and to ensure that these services are uniformly available to all patients, regardless of insurance status. To that end, I strongly encourage you to vote in support of SB 85. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Do we have any questions? Representative Bealow.
Yeah, thank you. Do you know how many states are have integrated this practice?
I do not. It's not in my scope of knowledge. I just know what my experience is here in New Hampshire.
Yeah, just a, would you believe? Lately, there have been a lot of news segments regarding this bill and how it's very effective in many other states. So it has been implemented.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Oh God. Representative Herbert.
Is this I noticed that it came through insurance. I mean, it's Health and Human Services, but here we are considering how to pay for an expansion and extensions of your particular service. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yes.
I have one follow-up.
Further question, inquiry?
Do we have estimates as to the financial, how much it's going to cost, or if we pass?
No, we do not.
Is this a study committee?
No, there is a commission and study committee in here to figure out sustainable funding, but this is a procedure. Maybe Dr. Brown, he'll describe it for you. Thank you very much for your
Thank you for
testimony.
letting me go first with
Yeah,
that. So
thank you. Okay, Alex Brown, you wanted to explain the team system.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And now you got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman.
My name is Dr. Alex Brown, and I'm here today on behalf of the New Hampshire Psychological Association in strong support of Senate Bill 85. This statement is also endorsed by the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee. I'm a licensed psychologist, and during my 10 years in practice, I have worked almost entirely within the primary care setting. I see firsthand what it means when patients cannot access appropriate services and the downstream effects this has on primary care and our emergency departments. Data from the CDC indicates that suicide is among the top 10 leading causes of death for Granite Staters, which disproportionately impacts both older
Alex,
adults.
I hate to interrupt you, but we've kind of got that already.
Okay.
For the testimony, and I know you want to read your testimony. We will put it in to the permanent record. But could you just focus on helping him out understand what is exactly occurring here with this bill?
So this bill is this calls for us removing the prior authorization, which impacts patient access to the crisis management services that are described in the bill. There's the three arms. There is the 988 crisis hotline, which is sort of well publicized and effective. But the other two services of the three arms are the receiving units as well as the mobile crisis outreach.
Yeah, so why don't you talk about the mobile crisis unit? What is that all about? So to help him understand.
So these are regional centers that are set up, and they are non-hospital settings where patients can be received and stabilized. And the mobile crisis units are just that. They are teams that mobilize in response on demand to patient crises in the communities. They go to where they are in their homes, in their workplaces, again, non-hospital settings.
Wherever they're holed up at the moment when
At
the
the moment.
crisis is occurring.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay? Okay. You got 1 minute to wrap up.
All right. Thank you. Well, I think I would like to, I did submit the data. I think that actually I think is really critical to understanding the need for this. I will just say that I want to, for the record, I want to tell a story of a patient that I'll call Richard, who has constant ideas of killing himself. He is unemployed and relies on hospital financial assistance to address his complex health needs. In the past 2 years, Richard has presented to the ED no less than 6 times for suicidal ideation and has been admitted 4 of those times. When there have been not enough available beds on the psychiatric service, he has been managed on the medical floors, all during a global pandemic when hospital beds have been in short supply. None of this is uncommon. It is, in fact, the state of crisis management in the state of New Hampshire. It is both excessively expensive and it is clinically ineffective. In contrast, mobile response units and receiving centers have been shown to both improve clinical outcomes as well as health spending. I strongly urge this committee to support SB 85. We urgently need to embrace alternative models to fund preventative services to keep patients like Richard out of our swelling emergency departments, the problem with which has been well publicized in this state, and who also deserve evidence-based options beyond our overburdened primary care workforce for crisis stabilization. This is true. I called Richard yesterday for a scheduled telehealth appointment, and he could not speak because he was getting into an Uber on the way to the ER. NHPA applauds the inclusion of a study commission to ensure sustainability of an effective system for crisis services, including feedback from the patients' and providers' perspectives, as well as from policy and economic perspectives. This work cannot wait, and this bill must not be retained. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Chair, we're calling Holly Stevens. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Does the requirement for pre-authorization for mobile crisis services put patients in danger?
It does.
Thank you.
Nothing else is a delay. It's a delay. It's a delay because it had how long it might take.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, Holly Stevens from NAMI, New Hampshire.
Good afternoon. Chairman Hunt, members of the committee, my name is Holly Stevens. I'm the Director of Public Policy at NAMI New Hampshire, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are a nonprofit grassroots organization whose mission is to improve the lives of all people impacted by mental illness and suicide through support, education, and advocacy. I will try to be brief because I know that we are between you guys and lunch. I've got some data in here that I'm not going to go through. You can read that. I have faith in you. But I did just want to highlight the reason you have this bill, which is the insurance provision on the prior authorizations, which you've heard a little bit about. In keeping with parity requirements, this bill would prohibit insurance companies from requiring prior authorizations for emergency mental health services when provided within the mental health crisis program, which is the mobile crisis teams. If a person has a physical health emergency, there is no prior authorization required for them to go to the emergency room and receive emergency medical care. A mental health emergency should be not be treated any differently. If a person calls 988 or the New Hampshire Rapid Response and is determined that a mobile crisis team response is appropriate, there should not be a prior authorization required before the mobile team is deployed. As you've heard, mobile crisis teams dispatched to the community. They can be seen, someone can be seen in their home, at a Dunkin' Donuts, anywhere. And so when you look at this bill, if there was a prior authorization, not only does it delay treatment, but it could end up costing more, because if somebody has to have a prior authorization before a mobile team comes out and sees them, it's easier to just go to the emergency room, because you know that if you go to the emergency room, there is no prior authorization. So in order to keep folks out of the emergency rooms when they're in crisis so that they can be seen in the community, it's really important that there is no prior authorization. And it's my understanding that as this bill came out of the Senate, that the insurers were on board with this, and they can speak for themselves, but I think they're neutral and they may not be speaking. So that is my understanding, and I will take any questions that you have.
Okay, Representative Herbert, but remember, you're delaying in the process here.
Just 15 seconds. So the mobile unit makes it, you don't have to have a prior authorization if a mobile unit shows up.
That's exactly what this bill would do. It would eliminate the prior authorization or prohibit a prior authorization for a mobile unit to go to somebody's house.
Representative Philip.
Thank you. During a psychological emergency, does a delay in care increase danger to the patient?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Chair calls on Ami Valeris, licensed social worker. And please don't tell anything we've already heard. Say something new.
I'll try not to. My name is Amy Valeris. I have a PhD in MSW and a clinical license in social work, and I am here to urge you to support SB 85. I'm a social worker at a primary care clinic in Concord, and I can attest to the mental health crisis in our community rising exponentially both in number and intensity in the last 3 years. Research has shown that nearly half of all people who suicide have seen their primary care office in the month before. This is a statistic that weighs quite heavily on those of us in primary care. Even one suicide has us spinning for days and weeks and years on should have, could have, would have, if we could go back and see what could we have done in our roles differently. The truth is, all the education and training and validated assessments in the world cannot give us a secure sense of whether somebody is stable enough or safe enough to walk out the doors of our clinic. This is a heavy burden to bear and speaks to the need for the mental health crisis response to live both inside and outside the walls of healthcare, available and easy to access in the community where people live. It is of immense solace to know that they have access to a simple number like 988. I am not exaggerating when I say it is this number that allows us to sleep at night. And when we lose sleep because we are worried about patients, we burn out and we leave healthcare. And currently, that is a problem for all of us, because when healthcare is understaffed, all of our healthcare needs go unaddressed. It is not only addressing the needs of people in a mental health crisis, but also addressing the overwhelming burnout of healthcare workers. Please support SB 85 so New Hampshire people can continue to access crisis services. Thank you.
Thank you. I should see. So evidently I had a pile of cards here, Grant, that I didn't see. So now we have Grant Bossy, who's introducing it for Senator Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Grant Bossy from the New Hampshire Senate, here to introduce you to a bill you have already been introduced to on behalf of Senator Jeb Bradley, the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 88. I will give you the about to break for lunch edit and get through as quickly as I can. The first two sections of this bill relate to the 988 suicide prevention line based on Congress passing the Suicide Hotline Designation Act of 2020. This helps implement that federal law here in the state of New Hampshire. Section 2 creates a definition of behavioral crisis programs, which includes a continuum of care based on the three foundational principles of our substance abuse: 988 call centers, mobile crisis units, and receiving facilities. Section 3 of the bill creates a study commission on sustainable funding of behavioral crisis programs. The last two sections deal with adding mental health or community-based health crisis intervention services into statute for insurance coverage. During the Senate HHS hearing, the committee heard extensive testimony supporting the bill, many of whom spoke about the mental health crisis in our state and the high rate of suicide in New Hampshire. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'll defer questions to the advocates. If you have any questions for Senator Bradley, I'll work to get you an answer. Other than that, I just thank you for your consideration and support of Senate Bill 85. Thank you.
Great. So here's some homework assignment for you. Representative Petusek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the Vice Chair of the Special Committee on Commissions, there is an omission in this bill. There is no sunset date. And is the first named senator willing to be the senator on this commission? I already know the answer, because that's Senator Bradley.
He's taking notes.
I appreciate that, because I know Senator Bradley
Okay.
personally.
I will get those
Anything
responses
else you
back.
want him to ask?
Nope, because the Committee on Commissions is trying to reduce the number of commissions. So if there is a sunset date that we're looking for, and obviously there is, because
As I understand it, on line 27, there is a repeal on
that's a sunset.
Section 6
That's a sunset.
on the study
If it
commission.
says repeal, look on the last line.
November
last line of the
1st,
bill.
2024.
When he says repeal, that's a sunset.
on here,
Yes, that's a
the
sunset.
remainder
If
of
you
this act shall take effect on passage.
read the line before that.
Yes.
Read the line before that.
The act shall take effect on.
No, read the line before that. Does it say repeal? Does you see the word repeal?
Yep. Bill of the Study Commission on
Next to the 6.
The Study Commission,
Section 6.
Section 6.
And then the effective date of Section 6, which is repealing it, is November 1st, 2024. So it has a 1 year, has a 2 year life.
Okay, it's not exceedingly clear to me.
This is how we structure
That's-
OLS structures repeals when we ask them to do them.
Okay.
On the Senate side.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Grant.
Grant.
Okay. Sabrina Dunlap, am I reading this right? You guys have an amendment to this, or no? Oh, you just what is this scrawling you wrote above the support? Neutral. Are you studying to be a doctor? I thought you guys were neutral.
We are. Thank you for the chance to speak. Sabrina Dunlap, Director of Government Relations at Anthem. I just wanted to clarify a couple things. We spoke when this was in Senate HHS, and at the time had concerns around some definitions that seemed vague. The commission did not include the insurance department or anyone from AHIP, so that has been amended. And the amended version, I think carriers are okay with, because some of the definitional vagueness went away. I just want to clarify that there is currently no prior auth for emergency services, including mobile rapid response. So the amended version clarifies that mental health emergencies are part of the existing definition of emergency services for which there is no prior auth. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that and make it clear, like, I don't think insurance is actually a barrier to these services currently, but we support the commission and support rapid response mobile crisis moving forward.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, Ellen Plum. Do we already have her?
Yes.
And Emma Savigny from New Futures. There she is. And John. Okay. I get cards put in twice. Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Be sure you pull the mic close.
For the record, my name is Emma Savini. I am the Children's Behavioral Health Policy Coordinator at New Futures. New Futures is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that advocates, educates, and collaborates for the health and well-being of all Granite Staters. I'll keep it extremely brief. We are here in support of SB 85. We think the study commission is necessary to find a sustainable funding source for these programs that you've heard how important they are to our communities. Many states across the nation right now are dealing with this same issue and dealing with it in different ways. So this study commission would just loop in the legislature to make sure that we find a solution that works for New Hampshire. Secondly, removing the pre-authorization requirements just makes these services more accessible to people, would help reduce our strain on the emergency departments, and it's also an evidence-based practice that has been shown to be more cost-effective. I'm happy to take any questions.
I think they're ready for lunch. Thank you. Okay, one card left. John DeJoy, New Hampshire Psychological Association. You didn't check anything, but I assume you're in support of the bill.
Yes, sir. I'm going to put a card in this time.
Right, that's a good.
Mr. Chairman,
Progress.
getting better. I'm new here.
You used to be a rep, if I remember.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, my name is John DeJoy, representing New Hampshire Psychological Association. As you heard from Dr. Brown, NHPA fully supports SB 85. Just want to make 2 points. This bill and the testimony around this bill you heard from the doctor as well as from Dr. Brown points out quite clearly the need for primary care behavioral health, why we brought in Senate Bill 235 that is now retained that we're still working on with the insurance department, and why that bill is so important. Secondly, in the commission, there are no clinicians on the commission. I understand it's a fiscal commission primarily, but you can't talk about finances without understanding the practice. And we would ask that a member of NHPA be added as a named member of the commission. With that, I'll conclude my remarks.
You would just send me an email on that?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. All right. Any questions from the committee members? Okay. We'll close the public hearing on Senate Bill 85.
I do have a question for you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Is the same committee for cannabis still going to be the same members?
Is the liquor committee.
Okay.
Liquor division, yes. Okay. And so I will be discussing with the commission what we've got here in the hearing and seeing how we can figure out some way to keep the ATCs in it, because everybody seems to want to hug an ATC this week. But I'll be honest, I voted against ATCs right from the get-go, because to me that it was the camel's nose under the tent, let alone the fact that if we were ever to legalize marijuana, how are we going to deal with them? And I predicted this problem was going to occur.
Cannot be administered. They have to be administered through medicinal means. Those compounds are very special. They're judged in a commercial setting. We don't have that.
Right, but that all you're doing is arguing for what I would say is then why can't leave the ATCs alone and just let them stand alone? But no, they're convinced they're going to put them out of business, because evidently the patients don't seem to understand what you just said. So with that, we're done.
Dems are going to lunch. Barley House. a free lunch.